In this video, I'll be performing the leg press and showing different variations of it and how we can bias different groups of muscles and different ways of performing it. So when I'm doing it, first thing I want to lower the seat setting to the lowest position, and this will allow me to have the greatest range of motion. You can see I'm putting a cushion, and this allows me to support my lumbar or low back, lumbar spine or lower back, so that when I am at the lowest position at the bottom, I allow my pelvis to come off the bench ever so slightly while my spine do not round, and hence supporting it and allowing my spine to be in a safe loading position. So this is known as the quad bias leg press, where I'm placing my feet in a relatively low position on the leg plate, and this allows me to really emphasize on the quads, as you can see here, because I am allowing my knees to go past my toes. Another thing you might notice is that I'm allowing my heels to come off the plate on the leg press, which really allows me to drive home that knees over toes movement. So this is going to be the leg quad bias leg press variation. You can see I'm also really grabbing onto the bar at the bottom, and this allows me to generate the most power because I have the increased stability. When I'm pulling onto the bar, I'm pulling myself down into the seat, which keeps my pelvis or my spine stable. Now, it's totally fine if your heel lifts off the plate a little bit, although it might not be as stable, but it's not dangerous. And the reason for that is so that we allow the knees to drive forward past the toes. Now here I'm allowing myself to be doing more of a bias towards my hips or my glutes, and therefore you can see that my feet are placed higher on the plate of the leg press. Now when I am placing my feet higher, this results in more hip movement, hip flexion and hip extension, and less knee flexion and extension. The quads work on knee extension, while the hips work on hip extension. And therefore here I'm limiting the movement at my knees and increasing the bias on my hips. But the movement stays the same in that I am pulling down myself into the leg press or the seat of the leg press by pulling onto the handles to keep my pelvis stable. I place my feet higher up on the plate of the leg press, and then I allow my hips to go as low as my mobility allows. Once again, if my pelvis lifts off the seat, that is totally fine. But I allow pelvis rounding, but not lumbar spine rounding, and hence the cushion allows to support that as well. Now here I'll be performing a staggered stance leg press. Basically, this is going to be similar to a single leg press. However, my lower position feet allows this movement to not result in too much shear forces or movement or shearing forces at my pelvis or sacroiliac joint. And this is important because ladies often during certain times of the month can result in that increased laxity and result if you're only doing a single leg press, it can result in a lot of shearing or movement forces at the sacroiliac joint, which can be irritating for that joint and overall structure. Therefore, putting it in a staggered stance leg press minimizes that shearing movement while allowing us to still bias that higher position placed feet. So whether or not you want to bias your quads or your hips, you can do that accordingly by lowering that higher position placed feet according to where you want to place them. But the main thing here is that the higher position placed feet relative to the other one will be the main mover, the main muscle working, while the lower placed feet is just there as support so that my sacroiliac joint and my pelvis do not get too much shearing forces while we're doing the movement. So once again, a staggered stance leg press is almost like a single leg press, which really focuses on one muscle at a time or one leg at a time, which can help with fixing imbalances if they are vastly different leg to leg. But the main difference is that we have another leg placing on the leg press so that we do not result in too much shearing forces at the sacroiliac joint. And this can be helpful for people who gets very sensitive sacroiliac joint, especially when it comes to shearing forces. And here now I'll be really doing a single leg press. Now this is gonna allow us to really work on that leg side to side, and once again can be helpful for addressing huge muscular or strength differences from one leg to the other. Now the only thing about this one compared to a staggered stand leg press is that number one, it can result in a lot of shearing forces in that sacroiliac joint, which can be a bit uncomfortable for some people. And number two is slightly less stable because you're only going to be using one leg, and it results in that slight difference in terms of pressure and force distribution. But at the end of the day, the movement and how to execute it is going to be very similar in that we control it down and we push it back up, but there is no rush in the movement at all. So the most important thing is that we want to bias the quads, we can lower the feet position on the leg press plate, and we want to bias the hips, we can raise the feet position on the leg press plate. Everything else remains the same, and this is going to be the same for all variations of the leg press that you've seen in this video. And they are, number one, we're going to pull down onto the handle of the machine. This keeps us stable and tight towards the seat padding, which keeps us stable and allows us to produce a better and greater output of force. Number two, we lower the height position of the bench to the lowest position, and this gives us greater range of motion. We put a cushion underneath to support our lumbar spine and lower back so that we allow that pelvis to lift off the seat ever so much, which allows us for the increased range of motion. We allow for pelvis movement, but we do not want lumbar spine rounding, and hence the cushion prevents and supports that. And lastly, if you want to have a quad bias movement, you're going to put your feet lower on the leg press plate to allow for knees over toes and more knee dominant movement. And if you want more hip dominant movement, we raise the feet position on the leg press plate for allow more emphasis on the hips themselves.